what I did do was I researched many cities, large and small, and the guidelines in your draft reflect what Johnson County government uses, what the state of Alaska does in Overland Park, and also the city of Hesperia, California, had a very, very good procedures manual. So that's where this information is from.
Okay, I'll open it up for discussion.
Doreen, on page 4, under chapter 2, section G, succession in office, is this something that was prevalent in the other documents that you saw? Because I don't know, it doesn't seem like it fits with the rest of the council organization and duties. It seems out of place compared to the rest of it.
Where would you like to see that moved, Mr. Moore?
Actually, I don't know that it...
Or just have it taken out?
Yeah, I don't think it
Okay.
belongs, actually. And it's already covered by charter ordinance and yeah, that doesn't have anything to do with I mean, it has something to do with organization, but nothing to do with duties.
My counter to that would be, how is this information going to be presented to the public? Is this going to be posted on the website, or is it, because I would think that the way it reads in G might be a little bit more clear than how it reads in ordinance. It might be easier to find for people that are looking for that information. I wouldn't say that it's out of place because it follows E, which talks about in the absence of mayors and other things. So we've covered absences and some other items. I think this is fine where it's at because it provides a little bit more clarity that might be easier to find for someone, just as a general rule. But that's one thought as a counter to the other. It's a consensus item, but that's where I would stand.
I would agree with Heath, and I understand Chris's point from an aesthetics perspective maybe, but from a community perspective, I think it might be a better way to say, versus the ordinances that Chris was speaking to. I mean, it just captures it, I think, in one document.
Would it read better if it was retitled something like permanent vacancies or something along those lines? It would say, or since we're talking about vacancies, absences or.
It's covered by our ordinance.
It is covered by the ordinance.
So to have, two sections that address it seems redundant and possibly a chance for a conflict, unless it's written word for word.
Yeah. Now that I'm looking at it again, I kind of wonder the same thing about B, which is newly elected members. And if we're just talking about the organization is the governing body, and the duties of the governing body, the mayor, the president and vice president of the council. And it doesn't really speak to, or does item B speak to duties? If we're talking about council members and vacancies, I mean, that doesn't have anything to do with the governing body or the makeup of the governing body.
Well, but I mean, it's titled council organization and duty. So, I mean, I can see
True.
where it all, I guess it can all apply.
Other thoughts?
But, I mean, as long as we're talking about G, and it is in ordinance, I still object to the last line in the first paragraph. The mayor may, with consent of the remaining council members, appoint a suitable elector to fill the vacancy. I mean, did you do any research as to how many councils let their mayor do the appointment?
No, I did not. I can though.
I mean, does anyone think that one person is more representative than the remaining 4 that come from
kind of takes me to my, why I kind of think that it doesn't necessarily belong there. And that's a discussion that we've talked about having. We talked about it when Randy joined the council in June.
Absolutely.
And actually, I believe the consensus, 5-0, was that we'll be looking at that at some point. And I've talked to Cheryl about that, and we'll get to it.
Why would just
But I
talk
just,
about it in a work session?
well,
I mean, what's,
because it's not really on topic, and the topic is the rules of procedure, and B and G don't really speak to procedure or duties. And, you know, we established what the governing body is.
I mean, is there any, I guess the question is, from a consensus standpoint, do we want to leave it or take it out? You know,
That's what I would direct to.
all right, what do we, keep it out of this document, and,
Let me ask one quick question. This is a living document. This isn't something that will be in place and we can't change it for another year's time. This will be a living document. So if we do address any of these and they need to be amended, we can do that easily. I
Well,
certainly
this
vote
is
to
not-
leave it in because I think it's a better summary of some of the ordinances and will be more, like I said before, concise and easier to find. And maybe a little bit easier to understand just for someone that wants the instant visibility to it, and then they can come back. And if we're addressing changes, that'll be a different time and a different session when it's part of the agenda and there can be public input if necessary, but that's where I lean to right now.
There are cities that review it annually in January, but that does not limit them to make changes throughout the year.
Right.
and this is not, enacted by resolution or ordinance, it is merely a policy?
Well, the recommendation is that it would be by resolution.
By
and
resolution,
that-
okay.
Right, as we look at some of the other jurisdictions, for example, Johnson County, there is by resolution, most of them are, it's resolution instead of ordinance. And the language that's here in G is, in chapter 2 of the code, so if we want to change this language, we're going to need to go back and do a code change. So we either leave this as it is in code, or we take it out.
So this is verbatim, what we're looking
This
at.
this comes from the code, so it stays, because it's in your code that way, or you do a code change, ordinance change, go to the code.
Which goes back to what
Every-
you said.
Yeah, well, every highlighted item is from code, right?
Absolutely,
So
so we're trying to get
I mean, either
consistent.
either we leave it all in or we take it all out. I mean, if the argument is that because it's in code, we don't need it here, then
Well,
then why
actually,
is that one the only one that,
that's not my argument.
okay.
It's just not. Actually, when I look back on it, I'm thinking B and G don't really fit with the chapter, and actually, governing body definitions over on page 2 in chapter 1, we define what the chair is, the governing body, and the city council. And, you know, I think we define that, if we're defining the organization, governing body, city council, mayor, maybe needs to be in chapter 2 as well. But I don't think that B and G belong in here.
So you're saying more aesthetically then?
No, I don't think it makes sense for it to be in here.
The section of the code, which is actually chapter 2, is entitled city officers. And the intent here was to try to address city officers and the procedures as addressed in the code.
So all of the codes that are highlighted under this chapter 2 are also part of chapter 2 in the city ordinances?
They're part of various chapters of the code.
Okay.
What's highlighted is in the adopted code.
Right, yeah.
But not necessarily under
But not
chapter 2
necessarily.
of the adopted code.
We can take a look.
And actually, G, I mean, I believe
Yes.
this is the language from Charter Ordinance 19 as well.
Section what?
The G, the succession and
Yes,
office section, I think
Section G
it's part of Charter Ordinance 19 as well, though. That's,
Do you
That
think
is correct.
that maybe it's just, instead of calling it succession, call it vacancies? Or would it be something like that, or is it just completely different?
I don't know that it belongs. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not gonna have a-
I'm gonna reach to a consensus, I think it does. I mean, we'll